Douglas Lawson, Vice Chair Patrick McCoy, Board Member Kashamba Miller Anderson, Board Member Shirley Lanier,
Here.
Board Member Glenn Spiritus,
Here.
Ex Officio Board Member Mayor Ronnie Felder,
Here.
City Manager Jonathan Evans,
Present.
Acting District Clerk Deborah Hall is present, District Attorney Don Nguyen,
Here.
District Finance Director Randy Sherman. Mr. Chair, you have a quorum, you may proceed.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We'll stand for a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Any additions, deletions, or substitution?
None from staff, Mr. Chair.
Hearing none. Is there a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
Second? Second. Moved by Board Member Spiritus, second by McCoy. Going down to consent. We have nothing on consent. Is that correct, Madam Clerk?
Mr. Call the vote for the adoption of the agenda, please. Board Member
Yes.
Lanier,
Yes.
Board Member Spiritus,
Yes.
Vice Chair McCoy,
Yes.
unanimous vote.
Nothing else for consent, awards, and presentations?
Item 4A, awards and presentations. Presentation by the Palm Beach County Office of Inspector General, OIG, Investigative Report 2024-0006, City of Riviera Beach, Failure to Report Water Contamination, November 2024.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Before we go into that, Mr. Evans, can you give us some, can you put this in proper order for us so we can know what we are to expect?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Good evening, board members. The intent of this presentation is pursuant to the directive provided by the Utility District Board to have a presentation concerning the investigatory findings of the Office of the Inspector General and their report that they published back in November of 2024. City staff did reach out to the Office of the Inspector General, and they have obliged the request to provide the findings that are contained in their report. They have a PowerPoint, and the presentation should take anywhere between 10 to 15 minutes, and then they will be prepared to answer any questions that the board may have. And so at this time, the Inspector, Kerry, as well as his team, is here to make a presentation to the Board of Directors of the Utility Special District.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. Welcome, Inspector Kerry and your staff. And Mr. Kerry, if you're going to be doing a presentation, it may be more suitable if you want to take the desk. And have
I'm fine to do it. I like standing, if
Okay,
that's fine
that's
with you. I could do that there, but we're
Okay.
just as happy to stand and present it here. So good afternoon, and thank you for inviting us here to present today. Again, I'm John Kerry, the county's Inspector General, and I'll be accompanied today in the presentation by Director of Investigation, Stuart Robinson, who will give some of the meat of the investigation. Just some background, as I'm sure you know, our office was established in 2010 as an independent office to provide oversight of not only the county government, but all the municipalities within Palm Beach County. By voter referendum, overwhelming voter referendum, wanted an independent watchdog to help basically our mission to do two things. On one side of the coin, we prevent and detect and investigate fraud, waste, abuse, mismanagement, misconduct in government of employees, of elected officials, government employees, people who are doing business with our municipalities. We do those type of investigations. Then on the other side of the coin, we are charged to promote efficiency and effectiveness in government. And so I'd like to present that like it's a two-sided coin. On the one side, we try to root out the bad, The other side of the coin, we try to promote the good. And we do that through investigations, audits, and reviews. And so today, in our investigation, what specifically in this case, I want to talk about our role in this case. We investigated allegations of potential misconduct of individuals. Misconduct, mismanagement, specifically failure to report what they should have reported to the Florida Department of Health, or misleading information. So that was our role in investigating individuals in conduct. We were not investigating water quality. That is under the jurisdiction of the Florida Department of Health, who investigated that. So we invested individuals and their responsibilities in this misreporting, failure to report. Our job, we conducted a thorough and independent investigation. We examined thousands of documents, to include thousands of emails, communications, records, hundreds of hours of witness statements that we took, statements and interviews of folks. We coordinated closely with the Florida Department of Health all along the way during our investigation. We shared information with them, received information with them on our investigation, and the city. And the city was very cooperative in providing the information that we needed and access to records. Our job, we made recommendations to the city and made some referrals that we'll talk about later on. That's our job, we can make referrals. So I'd like to turn it over now to Director of Investigation Robinson.
Thank you, Inspector General Carey. Once again, my name is Stuart Robinson. I'm the Director of Investigations for the County Inspector General's Office. I want to thank you for inviting us this evening to present our investigative results to you. So I'd like to focus on how our investigation was initiated, what we investigated, the types of problems that we found, some examples of those problems, the impact of those problems, and what some key witnesses, city staff, told us about what happened. The investigation was initiated based on public reporting. In January of 2024, there were multiple media reports about a single well in Riviera Beach that tested positive for fecal contamination, E. coli contamination, approximately 6 months earlier, yet the public was not notified within 24 hours as required by the Department of Health. We expanded upon that. Our allegation remained the same, that individuals failed to comply with the reporting requirements. But we expanded upon that and came to the conclusion that on over 130 occasions, contamination results, either of total coliform bacteria or on 2 occasions, E. coli fecal contamination, was not appropriately reported. So our methodology got us there. And this was our methodology. We received a full production of all of the water testing reports from the city and a full production from the Department of Health. Those reports were sent, the test results were sent by the city to the Department of Health. But there was a third set of test results, because while the city lab techs took the water samples, the test results were analyzed by a private certified testing laboratory, Capser Laboratory, that then gave those results to the city. When we compared the test results from the lab to the results that the city gave to the Department of Health, we found that on at least 130 occasions, the test results, often showing the presence of water contamination, were not reported to the Department of Health. On a couple of occasions, they also failed to report presence of E. coli, the occasion that was in the media in January of 2024 and discussed by this board. And then on another occasion that happened also in 2023 that was found through our analysis, we also saw that on 2 occasions, it wasn't just a lack of reporting of contamination, that on 2 occasions, test results were altered by city staff so that it would appear that wells were clean, not contaminated, when in fact they were. And as a result, wells were improperly kept in service or put back into service for use. So a little bit of terminology so that you understand, there were 2 types of contamination that we saw in these test results. Total coliform contamination and fecal contamination, E. coli. They have very different reporting requirements, and we understood what the reporting requirements were to investigate whether those reporting requirements to the Department of Health were followed. So fecal contamination is a boil water notice to the public immediately, and 24-hour notice to the Department of Health. And that well would, or distribution point for water, would be taken out of service, kept out of service, until that well passed at least 3 separate occasions testing on multiple occasions near the contaminated site. So fecal contamination, 24-hour notice to the Department of Health, boil water notice. We saw 2 of those occasions where that wasn't reported. We also saw a large number of lack of reporting of total coliform. That contamination is a precursor to potential fecal contamination. When that is found, reported to the city by the lab, that well must be taken out of service, not put back into service until the well tests clean, absent for contamination, twice in a row. And that reporting goes to the Department of Health on a monthly basis in aggregate. They put all of the test results before the Department of Health once a month. So there's 2 kinds of lack of reporting that we saw. The first is the absence of reporting. On 130 occasions, the city staff deliberately did not turn in reports of wells with total coliform contamination. And on 2 occasions, we found that reports were altered to change a positive test of either total coliform or fecal contamination into a absent test, a clean test. So let me show you an example. These are actual lab results from Capser Laboratories, the city's contracted lab. So you can see in this section, this is May 11th, 2023, well 862 in Riviera Beach, tested, you see a P there. That's present, positive for total coliform. That well had been out of service. The day after it tested present, then compliance director, Dr. Anthony Williams, who was responsible for reporting on the behalf of the city, emailed the Department of Health and said, the well passed, it's clean, can I put it back in service? Did not attach this test result that showed that it had total coliform contamination. The Department of Health emailed him back and said, if it's testing clean, go ahead. By the time the monthly report went to the Department of Health, the same testing document, same handwriting in the same places, same well, same signatures, had been altered. Now, instead of a P for total coliform, presence of total coliform, it was altered by city staff to show that it was now absent for total coliform. Our investigators took the painstaking time to compare every water test from the lab with every water test that was turned into the Department of Health and saw things like this. There were 2 times where fecal contamination was not reported. The first is the one we've already discussed, well 14. On June 27, 2023, there was an E. coli present test. By this time, Water and Superintendent Melvin Pinckney was the city's the city's manager that was responsible for reporting to the Department of Health. When this well tested positive for E. coli, Water Superintendent Pinckney did not do the 24-hour notice to the Department of Health and did not do the boil water notice. In fact, he didn't report it until the monthly report, approximately 3 weeks later. And by then, the appropriate testing to clear the well had not been done, yet the well was put back into service. The second occasion of non-reporting of possible fecal contamination was at a distribution point. This is after the water had been processed, going out into the public on Caribbean Boulevard. On this occasion, there's a little background. About 3 weeks before this well tested positive for fecal contamination.
Mr. Robinson, let me interrupt you just for 1
Yes.
second. 554, let the record reflect that we have Chair Lawson here on the board with us. You can continue. And we also have Board Member Miller Anderson as well.
Mr. Vice Chair, Board Member Miller Anderson did provide notice to the clerk's office that she would be tardy.
Yes, but the record is reflecting that 554,
Yes, sir.
Chair Lawson and Board Member Miller Anderson is present with us.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Ms. Robinson, thank you. You can
Thank you.
continue.
So the Caribbean Boulevard distribution point, the precursor knowledge to this, information to this is about 3 weeks before this distribution point tested positive for E. coli, fecal contamination, there was a safety incident with one of the city employee technicians that does the sampling. That was in early May of 2023. That week, City Utility Special District staff went to the police department and got a series of very professional recommendations for how to ensure safety of their water samplers, their lab technicians. None of those recommendations from the police department included any kind of deviance from proper water sampling requirements. Then, about 3 weeks later, the distribution point tested positive for E. coli. The proper retesting was not done, and that well was put back into service. 2 months later, a month later, the Department of Health found out about this through the monthly reporting and requested a response from the city through then Executive Director Michael Lowe. Mr. Lowe responded to the Department of Health that the reason that appropriate testing was not done before that well was put back into service was because of the safety incident. That was not true. At no point was there any guidance to the Utility Special District, either from the police or from the Department of Health, that they should ever deviate from proper water sampling. So the impact of this non-reporting. On 130 occasions, either present tests were not turned in or sampling was not done when it should have been. So the impact is the Department of Health reviews and relies upon this testing being submitted in full so that they're the water experts, so that they can analyze and assess whether water is clean to drink. On those occasions, that did not happen. So what did witnesses tell us? I'd like to focus on a few key witnesses from the Utility Special District. The lab technicians, one of whom is still with the city, one is not, told us uniformly that they received specific instructions from then Compliance Director Williams to do less than the required testing, and that they knew from Compliance Director Williams that tests that were present were not being turned in to the Department of Health. Executive Director Lowe told us he had no idea that appropriate testing was not being done. He had no idea that Dr. Williams was giving these instructions to the lab techs, but he told us that he knew that the water system was, to quote him, a disaster, and that, quote, he did not know how things were run in the Utility Special District when it came to reporting water quality to the Department of Health. He also, when Dr. Williams left the city's employment in June of 2023, put Superintendent Pinckney in charge of this vital task of accurate and timely reporting, even though he told us that he did not consider Superintendent Pinckney up to the task or competent. Assistant Director Doyle echoed those thoughts about Water Superintendent Pinckney and also did not give appropriate oversight to this vital process. Compliance Director Williams, during a very long series of interviews with our investigators, told us flat out that he deliberately did not report present evidence of total coliform contamination to the Department of Health as required. To quote him, quote, I think that, and he blamed this on unspoken pressure that he said he was getting from Executive Director Lowe, and he said was communicated to him by Water Superintendent Pinckney. To quote Dr. Williams, I think that they were telling me to do that primarily because of the conditions of the wells, and they said it was mostly because of the wells, they had a lot of them that were out of service. And I guess whenever they lose a well, forces them to open up the interconnect and stuff like that, which would end up costing the city more money to buy water from Seacoast Utilities. So they were pretty much telling me, hey, let's make sure we get to the absent of bacteria. Let's get the results into the health department to kind of clear wells so that they can get wells back in service. The OIG's follow-up question was, is that wrong? Dr. Williams' answer, based on the rules, it would definitely be wrong. Now I'll turn the podium back to Inspector General Carey to talk about our recommendations as a result of our report.
Thank you. Well, just before I get into recommendations, I guess the best way I put in summarizing what we found, individuals with direct oversight responsibility in the city's utility district failed to carry out their essential duties, resulting in the lack of reporting, submission of false reports, downplaying issues, and potentially putting the citizens' health at risk. So that's what we found. So our recommendations that we made to the city was, first of all, it's to implement proper internal controls, processes, and procedures, set up a system of checks and balances where this just can't happen, where there's two people, for example, the two-person integrity on reporting, where it's just not in one person's hands. So that procedures in place that can prevent this from happening. Institute regular training throughout the district so everybody knows what the rules are, and if they see something that's not right, they'll be able to identify that, which goes into our next recommendation of require the creation of a process of resolving reporting and compliance issues. The people can, what do they do? What's the process if somebody sees something that is not properly going on, their responsibilities, who to report this to, and then how, if there's a disagreement, to raise it up to the appropriate level to have some type of resolution on it. And then finally, take appropriate personnel action. Now, I want to say too that the city, their response, they accepted all of our recommendations and provided some information on how they were implementing those recommendations. We will follow up on these recommendations in the future. That part of our procedure, we follow up to when the cities or the county have accepted our recommendations, that we followed up to see if they have been implemented, and then we'll report on that. We also made referrals, and we've referred, as I stated earlier, to the Florida Department of Health, our findings and information. In fact, those 130 documents, the reports that weren't turned in, I know that came to you in the process of a report. Again, that was our office that found those and referred them over to the Florida Department of Health. And they have the whole report, and we've spoken to them since the report was issued. And then referral to federal, local law enforcement, and the state attorney's action for any potential action on individuals that were involved in this. So that's what we do. We did this not only to a service to the board, to the city, to the district, but we serve the citizens of Palm Beach County as that independent watchdog, guardian of our trust that's put in us. So that's what we did here. And as you know, anybody, we've had requests, complaints from elected officials, appointed officials, from citizens, from people doing business with our government. We can receive complaints, and we look into every single allegation that comes into our office. We'll take a look at that to see if it has the information, the evidence to conduct an investigation or an audit. People can report to us anonymously, can give us a call up and say they have information and yet want to report some wrongdoing in government. So elected officials at times have done that. People in the city, citizens, because of various reasons, they're not wanting their name out there. So that's what we do, and that's what we did for the city here. Are there any questions from the board?
Mr. Chair? Bob?
Thank you, Vice Chair McCoy. You're recognized, Dr. Spiritus.
Inspector General, do you make referrals to the state attorney's office on criminal matters that you discover?
Yes, we work closely with the state attorney's office. Usually when it involves wrongdoing of any government officials, they have a special unit in the office, particularly that we work with. So we work very closely with them, and we do make referrals to them and other law enforcement agencies, depending on the jurisdiction and the nature of the offense.
Chair, follow-up?
You recognize.
So, Inspector General, did you make any of those referrals with reference to your investigation in this case?
Yes, we've referred the entire report over to them. We've had discussions with their office, so their office has this at this point.
Mr. Chair, one more question.
You recognize.
Mr. Inspector General, first of all, thank you for doing your job and bringing this to the light, to the community. We appreciate it. And I assume this was all 2023. It wasn't 2024, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
There was we looked into it, but the major actions were in 2023, though we looked into some of the actions like the Director Lowe, his reporting, some of his public reporting was in 2024.
So that's where I'm going to Mr. Lowe right now, Executive Director Lowe. I see you have an organizational chart as part of your report. Was that the chart that the city submitted to you, or did you change that chart?
The city submitted a organizational chart to us of the district, and that was basically we took some of the extraneous organizations out, but that was basically the chart that the city provided us of the district.
So it did not, so they listed Executive Director Lowe as the CEO of the utility district?
As the executive director.
Okay, so there was no mention of any other persons or officials above Executive Director Lowe?
In that organizational chart, no, that's what the city and the district provided us.
Because I see that you made recommendations pertaining to the administration of the district. Would your findings be different if you realized that Executive Director Lowe had a person or two people above him?
Definitely. We followed the evidence. This is where the evidence brought us. So we reviewed emails, records, evidence that went up to the city manager, the deputy city manager, so other people in the city outside of the district. So we looked at all the evidence. This is where the evidence took us to these individuals. So we looked at records outside of the district and communications and interviews. And so did that answer your question?
Mr. Chair?
You recognize.
Okay, well, it sort of answers my question, but it doesn't resolve my concerns. Uh, Based on my understanding, the executive director, the CEO of the utility district is the city manager, not the executive director or Mr. Lowe, who was the executive director at that time. And I believe there was another person underneath the city manager, an assistant city manager, that was above Mr. Lowe. So there's two people missing from your organizational chart.
This is what, again, the evidence we had,
Mr. Carey, hold on, Chair.
I think you could answer that inside.
Mr. Chair,
Member McCoy.
this is very critical, and we waited a very long time. So I would really ask that if we can have this done without interruptions. Number one, it is already difficult to hear up here. And then we have commentary from the audience. You know, as much as I understand people's passion, I would make sure that we all get an opportunity to hear what is said without interruption, please, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Vice Chair McCoy. Residents, we do want to try to get through this meeting because this has been an item we've been waiting on. I agree with Vice Chair McCoy. Let's just allow for our speakers and the board to opine on these items. You recognize Dr. Spear. I'm sorry, actually, Mr. If you can continue, please. Mr. Carey.
No, I think I answered as much. That was our understanding that, obviously the city manager has a number of divisions, the police department, the fire department, and the district underneath his organization. But the organizational chart that we have, and as Mr. Lowe stated, his position himself was the executive director of the district.
Mr. Chair?
You recognize Dr. Spears.
Okay, so Inspector General, the utility district is separate and distinct from the city.
Yes.
It's not the same. The city manager normally would not have control over the utility district.
Yes.
But in this case, we have a different situation. And I suggest you might want to go back and do a little bit more investigation. Just to correct the report, I'm not putting any blame on any particular person, but that just kind of stuck out to me when I looked at the organizational chart.
Thank you.
Thank you.
To follow up on that question, the org chart was submitted by the city, but you did your own due diligence of researching who was in charge and what
Yes.
channels to follow.
Yes.
So I do understand my board member is asking for additional investigation or research, but you've done your due diligence and you've fully investigated all of these claims, and it's all outlined in your report.
Yes. And no evidence that we found or no interview that we conducted
Right.
after all the hundreds of hours did anybody state, in fact, Mr. Lowe stated he was the executive director, and no one else contradicted that or provided any information that would contradict that or the organizational chart that we had for the district.
Okay.
Chair.
You recognize board member McCoy.
Mr. Carey, so, Board Member Spirit has brought up that this is separate and distinct from the city. In your time as the appointed Inspector General for Palm Beach County, how many special districts have you investigated?
I don't have that number off my hand, but we've investigated different incidences within special districts, within dependent special districts, as this district is.
Okay, so, and I think I asked this question of you before, specifically, if the county ordinance or referendum specifically called out the 39 municipalities, is it your reading and understanding that this would be more or less a department or sub-agency of the municipality?
It receives, as it receives partial funds from it and under the jurisdiction of the city, as you're dual-hatted, not only as the district, but as the city council. Our interpretation is it is, and we've conducted investigations on dependent special districts like this before.
So
And
I would really tend to lend with my colleague, Board Member Spirit is, but the utility special district doesn't receive any funding from the city of Riviera Beach. Were you aware of that?
yes,
Okay.
well, outside of your positions right here and some other aspects, so.
Okay, so let me repeat my question again. Were you aware that the utility special district does not receive any funding from the city of Riviera Beach?
Does not receive any funding. I think actually that probably, it would probably be best to continue this if you wanted to get with our general counsel and have a discussion on jurisdictional issues.
Okay,
So I
well,
think, we've determined through our council that we do have jurisdiction, and I think probably be best to have a conversation with my attorney on this.
Mr. Carey, I like something very clear that I can
Mm-hmm.
point to. Now, I think it's the other way around. The utility special district is a independent special district that was organized under Florida statutes relating to special districts. If anything, the city of Riviera Beach receives funds from the utility special district. And, I don't want to get you in a situation to, get ahead of your general counsel. However, I raised the same concerns as to, and my concerns were not that you didn't have the authority, but when this issue first came up, I couldn't even get our own department to give us the information because they were relying on you guys to do the investigation. And there is nothing very clearly delineated that says that you have the authority over special districts. And I have the responsibility to thousands of residents that ask me questions that I really can't give an answer to because this information, believe it or not, as board members who actually, okay, so part of your investigation, did you review the charter of the utility special
Yes.
district? Okay. Did you notice that it does not make any reference to a city manager or to a deputy city manager? In fact, the only thing that was made reference to in there was a interim user agreement. So it's basically the interlocal agreement between the utility special district and the city. But outside of that, there is no, parent-child type relationship. We are independent. Now, we do, however, utilize employment services and IT services and fleet services, but that's all through in a contractual arrangement. So I'm definitely in line to kind of want to know exactly, the concerns of Mr. Spiritus because it was this board in 2019 that decided to specifically delegate their supervisory authority over the utility special district executive director to then city manager, Mr. Evans. Were you also aware of that?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So, I don't disagree that this is a very unique situation, but number one, I just didn't like the fact that I have to wait a whole entire year to get information when I got people that are employees of the city that's using our equipment that's going down, using our wells, but we can't even be provided with the information. Number one, I think that is not your fault. I think that's Mr. Evans' fault. Mr. Evans didn't come to the board. The board makes decisions by way of a majority vote to ask for permission. So number one, I would even challenge the authority for you to even conduct an investigation on the utility district absent of any formal action by the board. Because again, Mr. Chair, I would appreciate if you would please allow these folks one more opportunity because it is very difficult to hear. And it's very much a distraction to be interrupted in the middle.
Thank you, Vice Chair McCoy. Major Gordon, if you could have an officer, please stand in the middle of the room just to acknowledge any disturbances, to have them please escorted out of the room. Thank you, Major Gordon. Board Member McCoy, you're recognized. Thank you,
So,
sir.
Mr. Carey, you
Mr.
understand my concern? Like, I just wanted to make sure that when we have these kind of questions, and for example, very interesting, and I just watched this, and I know I'm kind of, I look at some of the odd things. When we look at when President Trump comes to Palm Beach, and the town council says Secret Service doesn't have the ability or authority to close down our roads. And you know what? They're absolutely correct. Those roads are owned by the town of Palm Beach. Just because it's an authoritative agency, you have local home rule powers. You have special charters that are in place that address these kind of things. Now, certainly they can work together, but unilaterally, no one person can assert that kind of authority and control over another independent agency. So I just wanted to make sure that you were aware of that for perspective purposes, because I particularly was concerned about how this all was going and in what direction and why we as the very board that is actually codified in the charter were not provide the information that we need to continue to serve the constituents that we have, because an investigation by an organization that can't specifically delineate. And I welcome the opportunity to find out if there's any kind of analysis or legal opinion that your general counsel may want to share with me that says the otherwise, because, you know, everything in every, I think in every arena revolves around subject matter jurisdiction and having the proper authority. I think you guys did a pretty thorough job, and I appreciate what you've done. Um, I would have liked, Mr. Chair, if I can kind of ask this question to administration.
You recognize?
Mr. Robinson was very great in his explanation, and I think it is important, Mr. Evans, that there's a response from either Mr. Michael, I can't remember his last name, but someone from the district that can understand and explain that when those positive contaminations came up at the well, that wasn't sent directly to a resident's home. It still went through the treatment process. So it's not lingering that, you know, this fecal contamination went right into my water that I got out of my spigot, you know, that there's also a process. So I think a little more context would be helpful if the board is obliged, because this seems to point to the underlying causes, but clearly I seriously doubt that there was any kind of contamination as a direct result, because there was still a water treatment process that occurred.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
You recognize Mr. Evans?
Certainly, to the councilperson's point, and before I provide a response, I would like the opportunity to consult with FDOH, because they did provide information that once they do provide a notice, we cannot say anything that diminishes the value of that notice. But so I would like to provide clarity, but the explanation that you provided is that, yes, once water is extracted out of a well, it still goes through the water treatment plant for the treatment process. But I can provide, and we can provide, I'll even make a call first thing in the morning and then be able to provide it as early as tomorrow that gives more specificity of the treatment process. I just want to make sure that FDOH is okay with that explanation.
Thank you. Fair enough. Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Thank you.
just want to state that it was my understanding that E. coli did come out of the water tap of a home, and that the city failed to test the 5 houses on both sides as required under county, state, and federal law. And that's why we had a major issue, that it was already treated water that was tested that showed the E. coli in it. It was not well water. It wasn't at the well site. It was at somebody's house.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
You recognize Mr. Evans?
With that particular situation, it was the test sample location whereby the sample tested positive, and then there was an analysis that was also done by a third party that provided information as it relates to the testing locations. And the reason that it was punitive measures for the district was as a result that the city did not follow the prescribed rule. And so if you follow the prescribed rule, you are required to provide the appropriate notices. So at those sample locations, I believe it was 5 sample locations, staff went out and retested those 5 sample locations, and it was not present in the sample locations. But since we did not do the appropriate testing that's provided by the rule, we had to put out the notice that there was potentially E. coli in the system. But when the analysis was done, if there was E. coli in the system, it was only provided to one particular main, and it's a report that has been provided to FDOH. And I believe in that report, they said that that particular situation was most likely a result of a sampling error that was incorrectly done by the samplers at the site. But we can provide that as documentation, and that information has been provided to FDOH as well.
Mr. Chair,
You recognize?
Mr. Manager, we set up guidelines and rules, from an engineering standpoint, with respect to testing for a reason. We did not test the 5 houses on both sides that should have been tested, so we have to assume the worst. The odds are it was not a positive sample. We can say that more likely that was the case, but we can't say that 100% because we did not follow the proper procedure. So it's very important. Hopefully we got the message from the OIG's report, that we must follow these rules. They're set up for a reason. That E. coli can travel through the system. It may not be present at the same site that you tested, and 20 minutes later, it could be at a different site. So it's very important that we follow these procedures and we give the public faith in the system and in our testing and in our water. And I believe that we are doing that now, and I thank you. I'm glad that we brought U.S. Water on board, but we must fill all those other positions right now. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, with regards to that, if I may.
You're recognized.
Yes, since the particular incident, like the Office of the Inspector General communicated, we have put in some fail-safes to address these particular issues. Even as early as today was the second training that was provided by a subject matter expert concerning water collection and water sampling. And actually, the instructor that is providing the training are plant operators are getting CEUs as a result of the training, and there's a test that's administered. So the staff has gone through some additional remedial training. We're also looking at codifying a policy that those that are entrusted with the responsibility of lab samples, that they will be issued a body-worn camera, and there will be a policy as to how the collection of samples move forward to make sure that it is under observation. And then also a communications plan that was adopted as part of the policy moving forward. So there are some things that have been put in place as a result of the findings that were provided by the Office of the Inspector General.
Sure. Okay, I just want to say for the record that, I speak with the mayor of Palm Beach Shores, who we provide water to. They have an independent test done on their water on a regular basis now, and our water is testing either meeting or above and beyond all local, county, state, and federal requirements. So the people can be assured that our water is clean and safe.
Mr. Chair.
You recognize, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Evans, you quoted that we are now doing trainings and stuff for staff, correct?
Mr. Chair, if I may.
You recognize, Mayor. You recognize, Mr. Evans.
Yes, sir.
Question. When the city hired you back, the water was the issue then, correct?
Mr. Chair, if I may.
You recognize.
The construction of a new water treatment plant and the facilities.
And this is not one person's fault because all of us have a blame, but did you think then to provide training for staff, or how involved were you with utility district from the time you came back into this January report that we got that there was E. coli in the water? What was your involvement in the plant?
Mr. Chair, if I may.
You recognize.
I would visit the plant from time to time. We meet on executive management teams every week. So there was interactions with the department director and all department directors for that matter on a weekly basis. So depending on, we would review the agenda items that went before the board and the utility district board. So there was frequent involvement.
Outside of your weekly meetings with the department heads, how often did you meet with the UD director? Just one-on-one, finding out what's going on with the department.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
You recognize.
Any opportunity that the department director wanted to meet with administration would be available, but also that particular infrastructure group reported to the assistant city manager, so there would be more interaction points from a daily basis with that particular individual.
Mr. Chair, how many times did you meet with the assistant manager and UD director?
Mr. Chair,
you recognize.
I don't have a specific account for how many times I met with the.
I mean, on a weekly basis, like, every week you meet with the department heads. That's a weekly meeting. When it came down to utility district, because this water issue was even back when we ran in 2019. So we all come in knowing that there was a water issue. You as board member stated, McCoy, the board voted you to be over UD. So that means you're up top. With our water crisis, you put assistant city manager to oversee the department. I get that. You can't do all things. How many times on a monthly rate or basis did you meet with the assistant city manager, the UD director to find out, okay, what's going on? Give me updates on what's going on in this UD. How often did that happen? I know every week we meet with department heads. This is a department that we said is separate just from the city. So how involved were you on a day-to-day basis, monthly basis, weekly basis with UD to find out what was going on? You had the assistant city manager there. What was the dialogue between y'all? Like, if she's getting reports, she knows what's going on. She's coming to you. You're calling to meet with everybody. Say, listen, give me updates.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
You're recognized.
I just want to provide additional clarity that there was multiple times where the assistant city manager did serve as the interim executive director at the utility district, where there was daily conversations concerning what was happening at the district. If you're speaking more specifically during the previous executive director's tenure, his involvement was primarily with Ms. Jacobs on a daily basis. And then from my perspective, there would be conversations that we would have, whether it's at department director meetings or capital meetings, or anytime the executive director called or requested a meeting, I would make myself available. The same process that I do for all the department heads. So at any time, if there was a concern or an issue, accessibility has never been a problem. And that department director knows that they can reach out to me if they had some concerns. Even there were some times where I have visited the plant unannounced for tours or invited by staff and the like.
Mr. Chair.
Recognized.
And of course, he's no longer here, Mr. Lowe. And I did ask Mr. Lowe that question. And I think, how long was he here? 3 years, Mr. Lowe?
Mr. Chair, if I may.
You're recognized.
I don't believe he was here 3 years. I think it was maybe 2.
2 years. So 2 to 3 years. My question to him was how many times? And he's quoted to me that he's asked for meetings with you that he never got. And in 2 years, he's probably met with you 5 times individually. And of course, he's not here to back that up. And I am concerned about that he was still here working when he told me he had requested meetings with you and he could never get you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mayor. Do we have any other questions for Mr. Carey of the Office of the Inspector General?
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you, Inspector General, the staff, for such a thorough report. I think what the Mr. Spiritus, Mr. McCoy, the mayor is saying that you should have said that the city manager was to blame. You should have said that the deputy director was to blame. But it appears that you did your homework in terms of where the blame lies. And I can appreciate that because that was one of the issues that we were having with the misinformation. They were saying that this was a city manager, and ultimately, it's just like the president of the United States. Ultimately, it goes to the top. But when you talk about the responsibilities of the individuals who are involved at the utility district, who are no longer there, you were very clear about where it happened, how it happened, the hundreds of hours of tape, the hundreds of hours of documents. All of that information provides us a clear picture of where the blame lies. And I think that my colleagues, some of them, are trying to tie Mr. Evans and tie Ms. Jacobs to this. Now, mind you, I said before, the president of the United States is over the whole country, which means that he is up at the head. But when you have to be detailed in terms of how this thing happened, why this thing happened, and you can prove it, I think that sometimes people still want to stick to a narrative that is not factual. That is my position.
Sure. If I could respond to that.
Sure.
Yes, go ahead, sir.
Okay, so I object. That calls for a conclusion. None of what I stated revolved around that. So I want to kind of go back to a couple things, and I was trying to establish some framework here because Mr. Carey did state that,
I'm sorry, Board Member McCoy, before you do go into your concerns, if Mr. Carey, if you could respond to Board Member Lanier,
no,
please.
I don't, no, I don't think so. Mr. Chair, I would ask that, because you asked for questions, she gave a statement, and I want to make sure that she didn't ask a question. So Chair, here's what my question was.
So, Board Member McCoy, we're gonna have Board Member Lanier. She made her statement, had her questions, and we have our guest that would actually like to respond to that. So I'm gonna allow for Mr. Carey to respond, and then you can ask your questions after. Mr. Carey, you're recognized.
Yeah, I'd like to reiterate what I stated at the start. We followed the evidence. So it's where the evidence led us up to Mr. Lowe, as people who specifically had information and either did not report information, misreported information. So that's where the evidence led. We, again, examined all emails, all records that involved both the city manager and deputy city manager just as well. So we would have followed that and cited as subjects, as people who conducted wrongdoing, wherever that led us. This is where the evidence led us. I think what you're talking about is management responsibility of what the board wants to do for, again, the manager. That's a management board issue, and that's not, the IG does not get involved in management decisions. I don't think you would want us to. So, but again, I can guarantee you, we followed the evidence, and if it led to the city manager having knowledge and covering up or falsifying information or having direct responsibility that knew, that would have been cited. Anybody, if it would have been one of you who had that information, your name would also be in that report. So I can guarantee you, again, from the thousands and thousands of records and emails and hours of interviews that we conducted, this is where the evidence led us, and we are confident that this report is, our findings are accurate and based on evidence. And anything else would be speculation and not within our jurisdiction. And I'd also like to add to a previous question that my attorney is here and can address the special district jurisdiction, so she can address and answer those questions right now if you would like those.
Well, I'm gonna allow for Board Member McCoy to finish. He has some additional questions, and then if you'd like for those comments, those were his questions and his concerns. Board Member McCoy, you recognize.
thank you, Chair. So, Inspector Carey, thank you. Earlier, you said that Mr. Doyle questioned the competency of Mr. Pinckney.
Yes, I think, I didn't say that. I think Director Robinson said that, yes.
I apologize. Well, Mr. Robinson, but I actually found it here in page 29 of the report.
Yes.
At some point, was there, well, I guess I should probably ask this question. Obviously, there are operators over there that are licensed or credentialed by some sort of regulatory body, be it a state agency or something of the sort, or a division or something like that. But what was your determination, if any, as to licensing in any of these individuals that were incompetent, didn't meet the qualifications, or any of the sort? Because I see that there are some there are some statements in here that alluded to folks not being qualified or persons not being in the appropriate position. Did you guys go into that to determine whether or not that this person was just in over their heads, they were just filling in, this was a part of their regular duties, or they were just placed in the position?
I'm trying to understand your exact, I think looking at people's credentials outside of this misconduct was not within the scope of the investigation. So I think, yes, if I could have.
Board Member McCoy, we worked closely with the Department of Health throughout this investigation. In fact, our initial predication to open the investigation was based on working with them. And when people assumed various reporting roles with the Department of Health was notified by those city employees. And the Department of Health has oversight over qualifications of people that are in those roles. And yes, you're correct, there are certain qualifications necessary.
So, Mr. Robinson, that makes a great point. So before you can establish misconduct, can you, for example, if I can borrow the police officer over here in the corner, if he's never been to the basic law enforcement academy, can we really hold him responsible for not being able to properly effectuate an arrest? So that's kind of where I'm getting at. So if these people didn't have the requisite training, like for instance, it was referred to that Mr. Pinckney, in Mr. Doyle's opinion, that was not competent to do the job. Well, was his job reporting in the first place? You know, I guess that's what I'm trying to find out. Did your
I understand your
investigation
point,
go
sir.
to that scope?
So our investigation coordinated with the FDOH to make sure that, to find out what training these folks had. And Mr. Pinckney, when he took this job, did have training from the FDOH on reporting, as did Dr. Williams. And as did another USD employee, David Salas, but he was out on leave during this time period when Mr. Pinckney was doing the reporting. So Mr. Pinckney notified the Department of Health. They knew about his certifications. If I could take exception, it's different from a police officer that's not certified, still in training, making an arrest. This was somebody that was known to the Department of Health as the person in that role, and the Department of Health analyzed and deemed him appropriate per his certifications to be in that role. My understanding of the interviews of both Executive Director Lowe and Assistant Director Doyle is that they were not enamored with Mr. Pinckney's job performance, not his certifications or his technical ability to do the job, but they weren't sure if he was the right choice for job performance, not because of certification and not because of training.
Okay. And that's important to know, because lack of training is one thing, but complete and total disregard is something else. So that's why I was trying to get to, was there a point where your office established that, well, this person was in over their head, or this person, in your opinion of what you gathered from Mr. Doyle, was just not up, the performance was not up to par?
And in fact, to add to your point in your comment, Board Member McCoy, there's a short interview cited in our report of, I believe the gentleman's name is Emmanuel Peters, from the Department of Health, who told us that the city USD staff was trained on reporting, and included in those people that Mr. Peters trained was Mr. Pinckney.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Thank you.
Going back to Mr. Pinckney, and I'm not sure, I think he got, Mr. Evans, you can answer this, he got promoted to another position while he was in UD. Is that correct?
Mr. Chair, you recognize Ms. Evans.
He was promoted into the water plant superintendent position a couple years ago, maybe 3 or 4 years ago.
Do you know, did you promote him?
Yes, sir.
You did. Okay. Mr. Lowe on page 29, he states to OIG, Mr. Lowe stated that Mr. Pinckney did not perform his work up to expectations. Mr. Lowe categorized Mr. Pinckney as someone who could keep up with a functioning system, but not a system that needed improvement. He had conversations with both City Manager Evans and Mayor Felder about replacing Mr. Pinckney. Nothing came to those conversations. Do you remember having those conversations with Mr. Pinckney?
Mr. Chair, you recognize?
If I may. I've never had a conversation with regards to the performance of Mr. Pinckney. Furthermore, there has never been any documentation, whether it's a verbal, written reprimand or anything concerning performance-related issues in Mr. Pinckney's file.
We know there's no documentation, so you can't recall, because I stated, I know he came to me. He never came to you about the performance of Mr. Pinckney, never.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
You recognize?
Lo and behold, as a result of this report, there was a lot of conversations that were happening that were outside of the management structure that weren't had with administration. I did not have a conversation with Mr. Lowe. Mr. Doyle, during his tenure, after the departure from Mr. Mr. Lowe, Mr. Doyle communicated that he had some concerns with regards to Mr. Pinckney, and that was the first time that it had ever been communicated to administration with regards, at least to me, as it relates to his performance.
Do you know if any of those conversations went to assistant city manager?
Mr. Chair, if I may,
You recognize?
that would be a question that the assistant city manager can provide an answer to.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Spoken with individuals involved in the investigation, but one thing I want to point out about our investigation, every interview that we conducted was conducted under oath. So it was conducted under oath, and we interviewed on a number of these issues. And also all the individuals who we cited were given an opportunity to respond and have their response in the report. So, but I can tell you for every conversation that we had, an interview was conducted under oath.
Thank you, Mr. Carey.
Mr. Chair? Inspector General Kerry, I had a meeting with Executive Director Lowe, former Executive Director Lowe. He made some comments to me. I knew that you were doing your investigation. I don't know if he did. But I'm wondering, he came to me and asked to meet with me and my administrative assistant privately. And he stated to us, they will not let me do my job. Now, I don't know who he was referring to in particular, but he made that statement. Did he make that statement to you on your staff?
We have this complete, I would refer to within our report, our interview. So I would refer to our report. We cite our conversations with him. I don't know if you want to say anything else on that, Sue.
So I would refer to our report where there's an extensive summary of the interview of Mr. Lowe. And that interview was recorded. So with a public records request and with the city's public records request, we can provide the full interview of Mr. Lowe to not paraphrase what he said to us, but to be exact. Our summaries try to capture the meaning of what people tell us, but the entirety of the interview, which was an extensive interview, is available.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, can I do a follow-up? Okay, this is to my colleague. I made a statement to the Inspector General with reference to his report and the organizational chart, and it was missing 2 names on that organizational chart. I made it very clear that I was not blaming any person in particular. I was making it very clear that there were 2 names missing from the organizational chart that was listed in the OIG report. The OIG did blame administration. He didn't say specifically any person in particular, but was blaming administration. So I just thought it was appropriate to make sure that we had a chart that did depict what the OIG was investigating. That's all. I was not putting blame on any person in particular. I still don't know who to blame with respect to after reading the OIG report. I just know that the system failed, and I'm glad that we're now on a new road, and I think that the city's water system and water plant is operating and functioning properly now, and I'm glad that I'm sitting here and I'm part of making those changes. That's all. Thank you.
Board Member McCoy, recognized.
Yes, Mr. Carey, can we hear on this authority and subject matter jurisdiction point that you were going to defer to?
I'd like to have my general counsel and Deputy IG Clintia Dillard speak to that.
Thank you, Mr. McCoy, for that question. I just want the commission to know that before we open any investigation, we always do an analysis of subject matter jurisdiction as well as personal jurisdiction. And since the office was founded back before my tenure, we've always taken the position that dependent districts were within our jurisdiction. So you made comments previously about independent versus dependent. Those are two terms of art that are specifically defined by Florida statutes. And the water utility is actually listed as or defined as a dependent district. And based on that, it is our position that we do have jurisdiction. The governing body is the same governing body as the utility in the city, which is one of the, excuse me, I'm just getting over a cold, but is one of the factors that determines whether something is a dependent versus an independent district. I looked it up today. It's listed with the state of Florida as a dependent district. I also want you to be mindful that I was in conversations with your council throughout this process, and that issue has never, come up. And that there was even a dispute with that. But like I said, I do want you to be aware that we did take a look at that, analyze it, and as we walk away from this, I'm hoping that even though you may disagree, that the report itself did add value to the residents of Riviera Beach.
Thank you. Okay, so that's nice what you said, but I was looking for the authority. You said in your opinion. So are you still relying on the referendum that was approved by the county voters that,
So
I'm sorry,
Go
allow
ahead.
me to finish?
Yes, sir.
Are you still relying on the referendum that was approved by the county voters that provided that all 39 municipalities were subject to it?
I am relying on the ordinance, the ordinance that chartered our office, and it does refer to the county. It refers to the 30, at the time, it was only 38 municipalities. It also refers to divisions and instrumentalities of them as well. So it's not limited to just the municipalities in the county by its very verbiage. And through our legal analysis, that is the conclusion that we've reached.
Okay, so in the event that we outsource the whole operations of our water utility department and removed ourselves from the operational control and providing water utility services to a private entity, you still would have that authority?
I think the way it was set up, because we also have jurisdiction over contractors. So again, our jurisdiction is very broad, broader than just the county and the municipalities.
Okay, fair enough.
There's no questions from the board?
Yeah, Mr. Chair.
Dr. Spiritus?
Inspector General Kerry, you're here tonight, and I hate to go off the topic. Did you receive any complaints about our election?
Hold on one moment. Mr. Carey, before we go into that, being that this is a UD meeting, I'm not sure that Attorney Nguyen.
Yes, that's probably a question that should not be asked at this meeting.
Okay. I withdraw the question.
There's no questions from the board? Thank you, Mr. Carey, and thank you to the entire board for the investigation and the time that you spent here. We really appreciate it, and thank you on behalf of the residents and this board. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Carey.
Madam Clerk, 7A.
Oh, we're going in the closet.
Do the base, to the basement. Yeah, there you go.
Thank you. Resolution 2-25UD, a resolution of the Board of Directors of the City of Riviera Beach, Utility Special District, Palm Beach County, Florida, awarding bid number 112124-4 to Quality Enterprises USA, Inc. to replace existing sanitary force mains crossing both the C-17 canal and the M canal in the amount of $3,159,593, authorizing the City of Riviera Beach Utility Special District Chairperson and Utility Special District Clerk to execute a construction services contract agreement with Quality Enterprises USA, Inc., authorizing the city manager to approve change orders up to 10%, authorizing the Utility Special District Finance Director to make payments from project account number 23040 in the amount not to exceed $3,475,552 and providing an effective date.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made, properly seconded.
Mr. Chair and members of the board, if I can have the utility district engineer, Mr. John Armstrong, to make this presentation.
Thank you. Mr. Armstrong?
Thank you and good evening, Mr. City Manager. Good evening, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, Board of Directors of the Utility Special District, Honorable Mayor Felder, District Attorney, District Clerk, District Finance Director. I'm John Armstrong, Senior Utility Engineer. Like the District Clerk mentioned, this is to award a contract to a proposal to award a contract to Quality Enterprises USA Incorporated to construct replacement of two old sanitary force mains at canal crossings, one of which is at the C-17 canal, which is a failing canal, actually, I mean, not failing canal, failing force main. It had several breaks. We entered into a consent order with the DEP roughly a year ago for a sewer spill. That's a Class 3 surface water. The data discharges, it travels north of the city and then discharges the Lake Worth Lagoon. There's also the other canal crossing is the M Canal. That's carries all the wastewater for the utility special district service area. And that canal is a Class 1 surface water. It's approved for a drinking water supply. It provides the drinking water supply for the city of West Palm Beach. So this project is approved in this. It's a budgeted project in a 5-year CIP that was approved by the board. We received or the utility special district received a grant from the Florida Department of Commerce in the amount of $1.9 million to construct this. And we advertised a invitation to bid to construct these improvements. Quality Enterprises USA was the lowest responsive and responsible bidder. So staff recommends a motion to approve this resolution.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, do we have any public comment cards?
That would be Mary Bram.
It's Mary Bram, Riviera Beach. This needs to move. See, this is exactly why we should move things. When he said it may be some faulties, it may be, I'm using that terminology, to the existing, don't wait until things occur. We act, for every action is a reaction. And our infrastructure and things in this city needs an action instead of a reaction. They go hand in hand. So in order to get this done, and this is that force main crossing, see, I know where these canals at. And if you all are not familiar with this city and how it is lined up, get familiar with it. So when these things comes before the board, you know exactly how to move them. Because Ms. Bram does. And I know that you're gonna move it, but I had to add these comments here. Don't wait till faulties. Let's do these things and continue to move on the things that we not shall, but what we must do. So thank you very much, and a happy new year to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, that's the end of public comment.
Thank you. Question on the board? Madam Clerk, roll call.
Board Member Lanier. Vice Chair McCoy. Board Member Miller Anderson.
Yes.
Board Member Spiritus.
Yes.
Chair Lawson.
Yes.
That's a unanimous vote with Board Member Lanier out.
Thank you. Let the record reflect, Board Member Lanier left the dais at 6:56 PM. 7B.
Item 7B, resolution number 3-25 UD, a resolution of the Board of Directors of the City of Riviera Beach Utility Special District, Palm Beach County, Florida, accepting the recommendation of staff and authorizing the chairperson and district clerk to execute a 3-year continuing services contract to provide professional consultation services with Brown and Caldwell of West Palm Beach, Florida, Carollo Engineers, Inc. of West Palm Beach, Florida, Chinmore and Associates of Fort Lauderdale, Florida, Craig A. Craig A. Smith and Associates, LLC of Riviera Beach, Florida, Florida Technical Consultants, LLC of Boynton Beach, Florida, and McKim and Creed, Inc. of Clearwater, Florida, providing for 2 one-year renewal options based upon the mutual consent of the parties and provide an effective date. Mr. Chair, we have one public comment card on this item. The acceptance of the cards is closed.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and properly seconded. Mr. Evans?
And any technical questions will be answered by Utility District Engineer, Mr. John Armstrong.
Thank you. Ms. Evans? And Mr.
Hello, good
Armstrong?
evening, Chair, Council, and the public. The Procurement Department brings before you a recommendation to award a continuing engineering contract to the companies listed below. The RFP was posted, the packages were reviewed, and so staff feels confident in those the submissions to provide professional engineering services to the Water District.
Other comment?
Mr. Chair?
You're recognized.
Mr. Armstrong, does this include, is this part of the water plant agreement as the owner's rep, or is this something different?
Mr. Chair.
You're recognized.
No, this is continuing engineering contracts associated with engineering services. So ultimately, it isn't, but we could use one of the firms to do like construction administration, but no, it's not really the plan.
Mr. Chair?
You're recognized.
So with respect to putting out RFQs or RFPs for professional services, whether it be owners reps or whether it be engineering firms, is that part of what your department is working on right now that we discussed earlier at the briefing meeting? Is this one and the same, or is this different?
Chairman, if I may.
Yes, Ms. Evans.
Dr. Spirit, it's 2 different topics. One is the continuing, the engineering services, and then any other swim lane is owner's rep. This particular resolution that we brought before you is for engineering services.
But can an owner's rep also be an engineering services?
If I may, Chair, it depends on how the solicitation was written. If it is by statute, I think that's Florida Statute 287, we followed those guidelines. No. It's just the engineering services. And I apologize, I don't remember off the top of my head, but owner's rep isn't listed as far as the duties based upon Florida Statute 287, I think .55 for CCNA.
Okay, so if we want to hire an owner's rep that is an engineering firm, we would go through a different statute and we are in a different process. Because they really wouldn't be an owner's rep, they would just be an engineering representative or consultant. It would just be a totally separate issue.
If I may, Chairman,
You're recognized.
I believe you are correct. So CCNA is engineering, but owner's rep could be an engineering firm. Depends on how the qualifications are written. However, we have to go back to the solicitation, and um, CCNA under Florida does not include owner's rep, but yet in an owner's rep solicitation, we can't ask for there to be engineers as part of the solicitation, but two separate.
Right, because I get that, because if you are doing a major construction project and you're asking someone to review the engineering documents and making sure that the engineering documents are being followed, we'd be better off having an engineer review those documents because they would be in a better position to understand that. Similar to what we did in Fire Station 88 and 87, where we had PSA Engineering acting as the owner's rep. They are an engineering firm, which gave them an advantage and gave us better representation with respect to an owner's rep.
If I may, Chair, the owner's rep solicitation 995-20-2 was just owner's rep. I believe I acknowledge that PSA happened to be the owner's rep on the two fire stations. However, they did not perform engineering per their invoices that were delivered to us weekly. They depend, if I'm not mistaken, in my research, none of their documentation, when they submitted their invoices for reimbursement under owner's rep, those invoices, they did not perform engineering according to their invoices. So there were 6 firms qualified under owner's rep. They also just happened to be either an engineering firm or one that partnered with engineering. However, we did not make that a requirement because and they just happened to be selected for those 2. However, we could have selected, or the city could have selected any one of the 6. They didn't make that the requirement for them to be engineers in order to do owner's rep.
Right. Mr. Chair, follow it. Yeah, well, clearly that gave them an advantage, being an owner's rep and also having an engineering background when you do a technical construction project like a firehouse. Certainly gave them an advantage. I mean, for an owner's rep, quite frankly, we can just hire a construction manager for $150,000 and be working for us full time. You know, so we have to be very careful when we just give out these owner reps positions because we don't always need an owner's rep.
Okay.
Chair.
Chair?
You recognize Board Member McCoy.
Thank you. Ms. Emmons, did you get the information that I requested?
Yes, we did, and I have it. Would you like for me to? Yes. One moment, please.
I would love for you to get it. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Sorry?
While we're waiting for Ms. Ammons, may I add to Dr. Spiritus' question?
Oh, I think he made a statement. I don't know if he asked a question. If you wanted to,
You can respond.
I was
if you
going
want
to
to
read
respond
something
to
in
his
the
statement.
solicitation about the new water plant.
I'm sorry?
I was going to read something in the solicitation about the new water treatment plant in this invitation.
But if you want to respond, Mr. Armstrong, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One thing, the request for qualifications does reference the new water treatment plant project, and it talks about there's a design build agreement for that. It goes on, the design build will be running concurrently with the continuing consulting services agreements. The new water treatment plant is being designed by others. However, the USD may require professional services as needed to monitor, verify, and support the design build project. Thank you.
Thank you. Board Member McCoy.
Thank you. Ms. Emmons, how many responses did we get to this RFQ?
Chair, yes.
You recognize?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Vice Chair, well, actually it was brought in we got 4 categories, so let me see. There's 3 three engineering consultants provided qualifications and proposal on the first category, studies and reports. And the selection committee recommended that all three be selected. Category 2, there was 2 proposals. That first category was studies and reports. The second category was water resources, water supply, water treatment plant, and 2 proposals were provided, Brown and Caldwell and Carollo, and so the selection committee recommended both. The third category in the objective included water distribution, wastewater collection, conveyance, and 6 proposals were provided. The request for qualifications recommended 3 consultants to be selected, so the selection committee recommended 3 of the highest. That was Chenmore, Craig Smith and Associates, and Carollo. And the last was in category 4 was instrumentation controls, and 1 proposal was provided by McKim & Creed. So the selection committee recommends the board consider McKim & Creed for that. So a total of 8.
Okay.
It's hard to, thank you, sir.
I thought I counted 9, but I'll go with yours. Mr. Armstrong, weren't you one of the evaluators? Mr. Armstrong, were you one of the evaluators a part of this?
Yes, sir. There was
Okay,
5.
thank you. Mr. Armstrong, I'm going to ask very simple questions, trying to fast track this. You said tier 3 was recommended which firms?
Was that category 3?
Yes, category 3.
The 3, and the highest score was given to Chenmore and Associates. Second highest was Craig Smith and Associates, and the third was Carollo Engineering, and those 3 are recommended.
What about category 4?
Category 4, there was 1 proposal submitted, and that was McKim & Creed.
Okay, so where is Brown and Caldwell, in what category?
Brown and Caldwell is in 2 categories. Yeah, and then, let's see, excuse me, just wait a minute. Category 2, and that would be water resource, water supply, and water treatment.
Are you aware that you just said to me a moment ago that you guys selected Brown and Caldwell, correct? As part of your evaluation?
Well, the selection committee recommended the board consider the selection committee's recommendation. Yes, sir.
You recommended Brown and Caldwell. Well, very interestingly, Brown and Caldwell was not even evaluated. Okay, well, if they were, they're not listed on the tabulation sheet. And in fact, on your vetting sheet, Brown and Caldwell was eliminated for being non-responsive. So how is it that you, who were ironically one of the evaluators, actually evaluated a firm that was deemed non-responsive by staff because they exceeded the page limit? Okay, let me go on to my next one while you're trying to scavenge through that. In fact, Ms. Emmons, you started this conversation off and I wrote it down that staff is confident. I have no confidence in you guys. You're asking us to approve a resolution to authorize the approval of an agreement. I have no idea what that agreement looks like. There's no agreement made a part of the backup. So we could be, for all intents and purposes, approving a continuing services agreement to pay $2,500 an hour. So on its face, this is not correct, but I will point you to the backup, and you're probably going to need a computer to see this, but whoever the staff person was that reviewed this, and they call this the procurement department vetting form, deemed Brown and Caldwell exceeding the page count, and they were deemed non-responsive.
Mr. Chair?
You recognize.
If I may, on an attachment to procurement, the memo from the procurement department, Ms. Boynton, excuse me, was Glendora Williams. Page 5 or sheet 5, it lists Brown and Caldwell. It's highlighted in yellow, says yes, shortlisted, yes, no, and then their score was 84 point, it's either 5.7 or 6.7.
Yes, sir, but just a moment ago, you said Brown and Caldwell was in categories 1 and 2. But this shows them as being deemed non-responsive. And I'm
I may have
looking at,
misspoke, I'm sorry, category 2, sir.
okay. So for each category, you had different page limits. How's that possible? Did you actually read the solicitation, Mr. Armstrong? Because I would have imagined you've had to if you were the one that were actually evaluating these proposals or these responses based off of the original solicitation. So
Yes.
I'll tell you what I'm gonna do, board members. I'm gonna offer an amendment to table this item because number one, there's not even agreement in the backup. So what we would be approving, God knows what. And this is the problem that I just brought up to administration. Members, 2022 in August, this board approved a franchise agreement with good companies. And there was exhibits A through L or something like that that wasn't even made available to the board. Now, all of a sudden, every resident in the city of Riviera Beach gets a letter in the mail saying that there's a price escalation that's going to occur with the trash. Well, guess what? That information was never made available to the board. So, Mr. Chair, I make a motion that we table this item and send staff back to bring back a fully baked item because this clearly is not proper in this form.
Amendment to the motion on the floor. Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion made and properly seconded. Did we have any public comment cards for this item?
Mr. Chair, we did have one public comment card on this item, Ms. Mary Brown.
Is there a public comment?
Mr. Chair, can I ask a question while she's walking
While
up?
she's coming up, go ahead, Dr. Spitters.
Okay, Mr. Evans, do you have the ability, we have the ability to pay Brown and Caldwell $25,000, right, until we resolve this issue so we don't stop any work at the waste plant?
Mr. Chair, if I may,
You recognize?
my hope is that maybe even later on this evening, that we have a utility district meeting tomorrow that we can try to resolve and cure whatever issues are. And then if the board would indulge staff, we'd look to put this back on the agenda at your meeting tomorrow.
Okay, thank you.
Miss Mary Brown, Riviera Beach. I sort of had some questions myself because it seems as if it is a little convoluted here. And I put it, I jotted down here. Who and what would they be doing? Who would they be overseeing? That was my question that I was going to ask. Since with Brown and Caldwell of West Palm Beach, Florida, and all the rest of these here that you have noted in here, are they overseeing them? Or is there some of the ones that was put out, for bid? And Caldwell got the bid or what? Now I'm sort of confused myself here. Who and what will be overseen as Brown and Caldwell being the consultants? What would they be consultants for and doing, overseeing? I'm using that word overseeing. So I would like some clarity on that. And apparently we have used them before? That's the second question. And what are they duty bound in doing? So those are the elements there, because it does seem as if it's still a little bit convoluted in here. Is it something for the utility district, to move our water plant? Or Mr. Armstrong, he's an engineer here. Is he connected here as an engineer with some of this that is going on here? So these are questions that should be and need to be clarified. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Before we vote on the amendment, Ms. Ammons, did you want to, I know Mr. Evans discussed possibly having this resolved and brought back to us tomorrow. Is this something that's feasible, or did you want to comment on some of the concerns that my colleagues have addressed?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Number one, all of the vendors, as far as the contracts are concerned, we can provide the draft. All of the vendors have the contracts. We were just waiting for them to sign and return the contracts. But we just didn't want to hold it up because it is so important. So if we read in the resolution, we're recommending like the city manager to authorize the city manager and the clerk to sign. So it's a standard CCNA agreement. We sent it to all of the vendors. We were just waiting for them to, sign and return to us. So we can provide you all with a draft of the contract agreement. That is number one. Number two, we can go back based upon the documentation that I see seems to be contradictory. We can look to see if Brown and Caldwell were deemed non-responsive. I'll go back and check that. So that can be something that we can rectify and have an answer for tomorrow. So number one, I believe I heard 2 points. Number one, no contract. I can provide a draft if we don't have all of the signed contracts back yet from all of the vendors. But then number two, we will clarify as far as non-responsiveness and being responsive. And according to our notes, Brown and Caldwell it was only for category 2 and not category 1 and 2. So we apologize if we misspoke earlier.
Chair.
Board Member McCoy?
Thank you. I would love for you to do that. In fact, I just went through all 24 pages of this solicitation, and I don't see that there's a distinction between the number of pages required for category 1 or category 2. In fact, it says 50 pages is the limit, and they exceeded that. So there's nothing you can do. In fact, I would love for you guys to do something because we just been in this position about 9 months ago where 2 firms were eliminated because of the confusion. And even still, I want to know why, when I look at the solicitation, this says exactly what the one proposer who came here and said, that specifically 50 pages, it says the required pages does not count towards the 50-page limitation. Can you speak to that? Because that's clearly not something that's been in our RFPs and RFQs.
Yes, I believe the solicitation was posted previous to my employment with the city. And so it was issued on June the 7th. In my professional experience, I never put page limits on solicitations. And so I think I've instructed staff that we're just kind of going to remove that requirement moving forward because it does become a contentious item. People using different fonts, people using pictures, even though the files do become large. So again, if it's in there, we have to go by what the solicitation posted and how everybody responded. We will double check that by tomorrow. If they did exceed their 50 pages, I believe I read some previous language that said it did not include like the table of contents. I mean, we will look at that if they exceeded it. If anyone exceeded it for any category, then that is non-responsive because that is what the solicitation said, regardless of how we're going to move forward. And so we will be prepared tomorrow on the page count issue. And again, if I don't have all the contracts, I will have the draft agreement that was sent to
Won't
all
have
the
the draft.
vendors.
You can't have the draft. That's not permissible. Ms. Nguyen, Mr. Evans, if someone brings a draft up here and asks us to approve it, they need to be reprimanded. This is the board that authorized a resolution that approves agreements. We don't get to see a draft. We want to see the final product because Ms. Emmons, I got 38,000 people in this city. And I'm telling you right now, nobody has been able to explain to me in 2 years how we get a price escalation notice in the mail when the very agreement that came before this board did not have that language in there. So we need a final product. So if it's not ready for tomorrow, you better bring it back at the next utility special district meeting. But there's no such thing as the board can approve a draft. That's just against public policy.
Thank you.
And while I'm on it, let me go ahead and give you this. 50 pages is 50 pages. I just pulled up Brown and Caldwell's, and I did not see any provision that the table of contents did not count towards that limit. They came in at 97 pages. So I would hope that they better have 47 pages that was a part of the required documents. But let me tell you something. This is a double standard. When you had a minority firm that came into the city of Riviera Beach and checked all the boxes and followed the same rules that you're applying right now, they were deemed to be non-responsible. Actually, they weren't deemed to be non-responsible. City administration canceled the bid. That's clearly a double standard. And to ask the board to vote on an agreement or vote on a resolution without an agreement is just very, very poor. And your first words, which I jotted down, was staff is confident. I can tell you, I don't share the same confidence. And I'm telling you this because this is not the first movie. We've seen this time and time again. And Mr. Evans, at some point, according to the charter, you're responsible for all duties and affairs of the city. I don't know how we continue to repeat the same mistake. Maybe twice, I'll give you that. But 3 and 4 times in a public meeting, it shouldn't happen. Thank you.
Any comments? Board Member McCoy has put a motion on the floor to, you restate your motion, Board Member McCoy? I apologize.
We need to postpone this and give staff the opportunity to correct the number of deficiencies with this and ensure these folks are compliant with the page limit.
No comments from the board? Madam Clerk?
Board Member Lanier,
Yes.
Vice Chair McCoy,
Yes.
Board Member Miller Anderson. I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. Oh,
Can you hear me?
I heard it. Yes, ma'am. Board Member Spiritus,
Yes.
Chairperson Lawson.
Yes.
That passes with Board Member Miller Anderson dissenting.
Madam Clerk, do we have any general public comment?
Mr. Chair, we have 3 public comment cards. The first being Mary Bram, followed by Margaret Shepard, and then Doretta Paul.
Public comment shall begin at 5:45 unless there's no further business of the city. In the event, it shall begin sooner. In the addition, if an item is being considered, then the public comments from the public shall begin immediately after the item has concluded. Please be reminded, the board has adopted the rules of decorum governing public conduct during official meetings, which is posted at the front desk. In an effort to preserve order, if any of the rules are not adhered to, the city council, utility district board may have any disruptive speaker, attendee removed from the podium, meeting, or the building. Please govern yourselves accordingly. Thank you, Ms. Ammons, and thank you, Mr. Armstrong. Mary Bram?
It's Mary Brown, Riviera Beach. I have a couple of things, and I'm going to try to run them as best as I can. My quotes for 2025. In order to be irreplaceable, you must be different. Coco Chanel. Another one that I adopted for the year is do what is right, not what is easy. That is a saying there that was instituted in 2018. And to the world, you might be one person, but to one person, you might be the world. Condolences goes out to Gerald Butler Baker and his family. He passed away this morning. I'm sure everyone knows Gerald Butler Baker. Thank you for your service. Miss Dolores Dawson, she eulogized her sister on last Saturday. Miss Dolores Dawson. Martha Pixton Jones. And to my family, my nieces and my nephews, my grandnephews, they had a homegoing celebration up at Mount Pleasant Heights on Saturday as well, too, for Yvette and her sisters, Linda, Nika, and the others, and to the coach up at Palm Beach Gardens, his aunt as well too. So the condolences goes out to my nieces and my nephews and my other in-laws and grandnieces and nephews for the loss of their aunt. And I ask you to pray for their mother, Miss Helen Fields. They were fixtures up in Monroe Heights for centuries and years. They are well established up there. And their mother, Miss Helen, she's suffering deeply because Yvette was her caretaker. And I know what it's like to be a caretaker. Mr. Brown passed in 2018, and I was his devoted caretaker. So let's keep her in prayer, as well as Dozier. Marion Dozier dad. He's not doing well at all himself. So it is a lot that is going on within our city. So we're asking deeply for that. The parade, 41st annual parade, January the 18th, so at 10 o'clock p.m. Community meeting, January the 27th, 6 o'clock p.m. Mrs. Spiritus is narrating this community event here. Also, MLK breakfast, Edith Bush, on January the 20th. So come on out and have a good time. Zara Neal, we're sponsoring a trip there for Zara Neal. So if you would like to go,
Thank you, Ms.
contact
Brown.
Ms. Bush. Thank you very much.
Margaret Shepherd.
Margaret Shepherd, Riviera Beach. That was a very interesting meeting with the gentleman that was here. You asked the question, who do you blame? Appears like it's a blame game. He did this and she did that and they did that. But what happened was we suffered. We suffered with people not really taking care of their community, the people that we elect. I sit here and I heard Kashama Miller Anderson say she's a elected official, one of the most sickening people I've ever run up to take care of District 2. And it's very sad. It is one of the most saddest moments. And I hope the Inspector General, I don't know who did what, but I hope that this city pay the $1.2 million. I hope that they pay for what they did. Mr. Evans is the CEO of this organization. If Dr. McCoy had not said that day and started talking, I was sitting there, Ms. Williams and I, and you know, I couldn't believe what I heard. This was done in 2023. We got into 2024 and you decide to spill your guts and start talking to us about what was going on. This year, I heard someone say something I'm about to get through. They said Cedric Thomas is a washout. Cedric Thomas is not a washout. Cedric Thomas made it very clear he's grown up, he's now fit and able to come back to lead this city. And I want to make sure that those that's going out giving this rendition of who I'm supporting, make sure you know I said who I'm supporting. I'm getting a multitude of calls, people telling me who I'm supporting. And it's just a group of us. We all know who's doing what. And we all do not go outside the group and talk about what we're doing. But I want to say to the citizens of Riviera Beach, March 11th, it's going to be a change in this city. A couple of people, they're going to miss that board because we're going to make sure that you get up off this board. And if you want to drink the water, Shirley Lanier said, drink it. If you're a fool, drink it. Drink the water if you are a fool. Because I know one thing, is something wrong with the water. Who did what? Why did they do it? I have no idea. I don't even care. I know someone has to pay for whatever, whether it's Mr. Pickney or whoever criminal charges should be filed against them. But most of all, I hope that the city of Riviera Beach pay that $1.2 million. Instead of giving out sand, you should have gave out some water. Thank you.
The last speaker is Doretta Paul.
Well, good evening. My name is Doretta Hawk, and I thank Mr. Evans for bringing this investigation, the Inspector General, in to talk to us concerning the direction of how this report was followed and how it was determined. And he stated that he followed the evidence, and the evidence led to Mr. Lowe. He stated that he did thousands of reports and emails that was conducted. And if Mr. Doyle, he stated that Mr. Doyle felt that Mr. Williams wasn't capable. Well, if he felt that way, why didn't he act on it? Why didn't he do something about it? Which from what the report is stating, there was nothing done. And as far as the tests were altered, and the city staff deliberately did not report this to the state health department. Proper retesting was not done. Lack of reporting. And Mr. Williams said, the Inspector General said he asked Mr. Williams concerning his part in running the utility district. And he said that, yes, things were not done properly. So this investigation, like he said, leads to Mr. Lowe. So all of this insinuation concerning Mr. Evans or Mrs. Deirdre Jacobs, let's lay that to bed. Let's now go and do what we need to do for the city of Riviera Beach. And as far as Councilwoman Lanier, she stated that the water is safe because she got that from the U.S. Department of Water Department. And now you have my vote. You have all brought so many things to the city, so many programs to the city. You have my vote. And let's stop this name game and blaming game. Let's stop this. And let's just take care of the citizens of Riviera Beach. And Ms. Evans, will we be getting a copy of this report? Can we get that if possible? And I thank you very much. Let's take care of one another and be kind.
Mr. Chair, that's the end of public comment.
Madam Clerk, comments from City Manager? None, Mr. Chair.
No, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Statements from the board, starting with the mayor. Board Member McCoy?
Yes, Mr. Evans, no comments? Surely you got to have something. Mr. Evans, January 24th, 2024. That's just about a year ago when we bought this out. You bet, Mr. Evans, where's your response to this? You asked for oversight over the Utility Special District's executive director to hire and also to supervise. So when your employee doesn't do what they're supposed to do, what's your response? Mr. Evans, I need an action plan. In fact, I'm astonished, right? And I think certainly members and public, we have to take what the Inspector General said with a grain of salt, because wasn't it Mr. Lowe that sat in front of us and told us that he's brought several items to this board and we've chose not to support him? And I simply asked the question, well, what exactly did you ask of the Utility Special District Board that we did not do? Because this is certainly not my wheelhouse, and I don't want to be the one that has to sit up here and deprive somebody of clean water. So, Mr. Evans, there seems to be a disconnect. And I know you got your fan club. I'm not impressed by that. Let me tell you something. March 11th can't come fast enough, because Trodrick has been here. Trodrick ain't going nowhere, whether it's on this side or that side. I expect that my water's clean because I got a 10-year-old. I got a whole family that lives in this community. So for me, Mr. Evans, to see that everybody can point the blame at Mr. Lowe, where's your responsibility that lies in this? Because you came to the board and asked for that authority. And you have the responsibility under the charter for all affairs of the city. So I don't want to see us doing the good things and the bad thing. I mean, doing the good things, but not addressing the things that we are challenged with. Mr. Evans, I wanted to ask Mr. Carey, but this is more of a question for you. Employees need to have and be audited in their roles. Mr. Pinckney did not have what it takes to be in that position. Qualifications is just one part. The wherewithal and the willingness to do the job is another. If he's not there and he's not ready to work, in fact, in the most critical department within the city, then it's time to move people out. And I think I should say the same thing about folks in procurement, because there is no way that this board, and I can't for the life of me understand why my colleague would not support something. I mean, she would literally not support us sending something back that even our own attorney said is not legal. Like, this is heartbreaking that I have to sit here and prepare for an agenda item for staff to bring me something that's not even an agenda, that's not even an agreement that's backed up. Mr. Evans, we have to resolve some of the major issues. And I know your plate is full, but at some point, if department heads aren't doing what they need to do, they need to be on a personnel action plan. Not so much for discipline, but this is what we need to improve on. Mr. Evans, I expect that when employees are in positions, when I call up and I ask for information, I'm not giving the runaround. I've told you today, there's one instance that I've been trying to resolve with somebody that has been overbilled with trash, and that took 3 weeks. Not to mention, I ironically have the same issue that I've been dealing with since October 2022. But you got some people that'll sit here in the audience and think that you're infallible, as if you don't make mistakes. Mr. Evans, I don't have the ability to tell Randy Sherman anything. But when I bring a problem to administration, I expect that someone prioritizes it, because I can't go anywhere without that resident following back up with me. Mr. McCoy, what's going on with this issue, or what's going on with that issue? Me, I mean, with the price of inflation, I probably can't afford $26 a month in trash. But considering the fact that it's already paid through by HOA fees, why should I be paying double? Why should my neighbor, who we all know, and I just explained this to you, have two credits totaling almost $3,000 where he was overbilled by our utility billing department? So should I not be angry? Should I not be upset when we're doing this to the very people that come out here and try to make an honest living, and we have our city that's literally robbing them? Let me tell you something. Good, bad, or indifferent, I stay up at night. I work my hardest. I'm a single father. And you know what I try to teach my son? Excellence is not mediocrity. And mediocrity is not excellence. And I come prepared every single day when I get up in the morning with whatever I'm doing, that I'm not accepting mediocrity. I'm going to try my darnest to be excellent. And I think if you do that, and I'm not saying in particular you, Mr. Evans, because I got to grant you the credit that I've never seen a city manager work as hard as you. But Mr. Evans, I don't want us to accept mediocrity and then some kind of way interpret that to be excellence. Because a person shows up and they do what they're supposed to do, that's their job. When you go above and beyond, then I expect us to compliment and commend our employees for doing great things and going up and beyond, not for doing your job. But it angers me that somebody can sit here, work all of this time, have all of these 6 agreements, and not one of them is presented to the board. And then we get down the line and we find out a situation like, well, how come they got billed that much? Well, when you go back and look at the agenda documents, the board approved a resolution that didn't even have the agreement. And who looks bad? Because we're the ones that vote on it, not the staff that presented it. It's like, come on, Mr. Evans, give me some help. And trust me, I'm for you, but I just got to be able to see where this is reciprocated, that we have so much that we're responsible for. And perhaps I'm not a privy to it, and sometimes because it's personnel matters, I shouldn't be. But I just expect that when things come to us, that they're done right. And if they're not done right, let's figure out a way to get it done. But certainly there has to be an administrative response to all of these deficiencies that were called out in here. Now, great that you have been working on improving some of those internal control processes, but as far as recruitment, making sure that we have the appropriate personnel that is not only qualified but willing to do it. I'm ready to see something in action, because there shouldn't be just, we're going to work on the internal controls, but we need to do an overall overhaul. Mr. Evans, I challenged our system, and you know that. Ms. Jacob knows it. Ms. Wynn knows it. Probably my board members. I used to can drive in utility district with my vehicle all the way to the front of the building, and people would be asleep on the job. God forbid if somebody wanted to contaminate our water supply. And I mean, this is the kind of stuff that I'm just like, and you know why I'm speaking with such passion? because folks should know it's not the $19,000 a year that I love to talk about. It's that because I live here and I care and I just want the best for my community. And I'm not going to accept mediocrity from anybody. And Mr. Evans, I just hope that we come up with a plan to address some of these deficiencies, not just solely revolving around the OIG, but it really inked me that I sat up here and had to wait a whole entire year to get something, that information that could have been made available to the very board that oversees the district. So, Mr. Evans, I know that was a lot, but certainly I'm saying this because I really want the best for our organization. But you have done an excellent job. But there are still areas that I know that we have to improve as a city, and I'm not seeing that. So, I just would love to see what kind of response we can get in terms of the OIG report, among others, but certainly that for starters, Mr. Evans.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
You recognize?
Certainly, we can provide a presentation with regards to some of the things that we're working on the utility special district. We did provide a response to the OIG as it relates to some of the things that are happening, but we have been getting into granular elements associated with some of the deficiencies with U.S. Water. And one of the items that we want to bring forward for the board's consideration is greater involvement from U.S. Water. We are going to look to restructure and reorganize some elements of the utility district that segregate duties and responsibilities and provide better oversight and a limited span of control. And so that's something that I can provide you all in the next couple of weeks, hopefully by your next utility district meeting, that I can give you greater specificities on some things happening at the utility district. But certainly, as a result of what the OIG uncovered, there's a lot of conversations that we've had with staff. The staff is focused on moving forward in a way that they're proud of the work they do and the product they provide, and they understand what the charge and the responsibility is. And so certainly, we're going to look to do what we can to continue to improve. And certainly, the item that was before you this evening, as it relates to the engineering services, I had a conversation with the assistant city manager, and I'm going to have a conversation after this meeting that we're going to resolve and cure those issues. Do we have issues that we need to resolve? Absolutely. Are we at fault for some of these issues? Absolutely. But we want to cure those issues and we want to resolve those issues. And I do challenge the board, if there's ever situations and circumstance that information is not accurate, or there's some things that are missing, please provide some information to us so we can take a look at that. And certainly, I know when I do respond to you all and department directors are copied, I expect the department directors to carry those issues out and resolve those particular issues and follow back up. And in some cases, I've had to follow up with them about not closing the communications loop. And so we're gonna work harder on that and better on that, because we have to provide better customer service to you, the board, and to the general public, because at the end of the day, people want their issue resolved, but they also want to make sure that it's done so in a fashion that explains what the issue is and cures what the issue is. And certainly, I live in this community. My family lives in this community, has always lived in this community. So, when we're not doing the things that we need to do as staff, I take full responsibility and ownership on that. And I expect that those that are in leadership charge do the same and take it with a sense of pride and a sense of, we're preserving the public trust, and we have a responsibility to do the things that we need to do to move the agency forward. So the crux of that, I'm going to bring you all a little bit more detailed presentation that's going to share some greater specificities of what we're doing in the district. But I knew that this probably wasn't the venue to get into greater specificities, and having some members of the team to communicate some of the things that we have done at the district since the report became public.
Follow-up, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Evans, for that. And I really do appreciate that. And I will allow you to use your discretion in determining whether or not a public meeting is best. I want to know that something's in place. I want to know that management has a response. Sometimes the public meeting isn't the best, right? Especially considering our water department, because there's vulnerabilities inherently there. So if this is a conversation, a one-on-one, but I just, want to make sure that we don't have to expose everything that we're working on, and things, the safeguards that we put in place. So, and additionally, everything is just not for public consumption. I just want to be assured that, we've given our manager what we expect as far as operational control, and then, you execute that and, memorialize it with a memo. Works for me. I just want to make sure that we're not leaving these things to fall by the wayside. I think that's all I have, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Evans, for understanding that, certainly my expressions is out of my passion and care for this organization and the people we serve. But some people, when you can't give an answer to them because you don't know, that just really makes me feel like I'm not doing my job as a public servant because I don't have an answer. So thank you for your diligence in working on that in this situation. But I would have loved to say, right, that the OIG does not have the jurisdiction because I want to be able for us to figure this out in-house and it doesn't take us a year. I mean, granted, I don't know that we would have went into that far of a detail, but let me tell you something. I hope there are some referrals to the state attorney's office for this because this is wanton disregard to put folks' lives at risk. And as much as we're challenged here and we have to hold our nose and vote, um, for rate increases, I think certainly we don't need anybody along the way in this treatment process compromising public health by just disregarding the rules because they're exhausted or whatever the reason may be. I have no idea, but certainly, I appreciate Inspector Carey's efforts and your staff for working with them, but I certainly didn't imagine that we was going to have to wait a whole entire year to figure out what was going on. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Ms. Miller Anderson?
I did just want to say, Mr. McCoy, I never question why you vote the way you vote. And, we all vote our conscience. And so just want to make sure that we can respect each other's choices in terms of why they're saying what they say. And the other thing is I do appreciate the OIG coming out and providing that clarification for us. We know that the water utility district has been a mess for decades. As I've said before, we are the board that has been trying to make it better. Mr. Evans, Ms. Jacobs, and everyone else that has been working under them have been working very hard to correct a lot of the things that have been wrong for decades. And so, I don't want that to get lost in everything that's going on because we have truly done a lot to make it better. It's not perfect. It is not nowhere near where it was. So, we have to acknowledge that because it's been a lot going on in the district over the years. And the proper maintenance, just neglect over the decades has come to a point, as with all of our facilities, where we're the ones that's having to fix it. And we have tried to do that. And so I appreciate Mr. Evans and his team for trying to get the job done, even when it has been difficult. Unfortunately, when you have people that work under you that are not always truthful, I mean, you have a lot of employees and one or two people cannot oversee everyone, but you expect people to be professional in their jobs and to be honest about what they're doing. I don't know how you control people that, I don't want to say control, how do you manage people that don't tell the truth? Especially when you have to rely on them to provide the information to you. And if you have them in that position, you want to believe people are there because they truly care to be there and they care about what they're doing and they care about their licenses that they have. Unfortunately, some people don't. They don't tell the truth. And when that happens, and when it's brought to people's attention, then you have to address it. So, and I think that was done. Like I said, you hope that people will be honest. And when it does not happen, things like this happen. And so I do believe we're trying to move forward and make sure that proper procedures are in place, or at least to have some protective measures in place so that we don't have anything happen like this again. And so I wanted to say thank you. I appreciate OIG for coming out and putting some clarity to their report, even though it was very specific and clear as to what it said. But, it was good to have them come here and do the presentation so that we were not confused about what it meant. Thank you.
Espiritus?
I too would like to thank the OIG for doing the report and being here this evening. That was very unusual, but I'm glad he was here and put on his presentation. I still don't know whose fault it was, but clearly it was one of the employees who are no longer here. And I'm glad that they're not here. They let the community down. The community had faith in them and trust in them, as did our administrative staff. It's unfortunate. Hopefully, we'll be able to replace them with competent people that we can have trust in. Uh, I'm glad that the city manager realizes that the buck stops at his desk, and that doesn't mean that you're at fault. It just means that the buck stops there, and you have to do something to change the system. As my colleague, Councilman McCoy, just stated recently in his conversation with Mr. Evans, we really have a lot to do in the water district right now. Bringing in U.S. Water and Susan Melamud, PE, were excellent decisions, and I think that we're in the right direction right now. But we do have to fill those 5 positions. We can't leave them empty. We must get competent people in here uh, to take over and that we can have trust in. So rather than looking in the rearview mirror, I think we did a lot of that tonight, and we did a lot of it in the last few months. As I always state to you, Mr. Evans, we have to look through the windshield right now. We have the whole world ahead of us here in Riviera Beach. Tremendous things are happening. Clearly, a lot of people don't like to talk about it. They like to talk about the negativity. They don't like to talk about the positive things that are happening. But maybe it's time for us to put some light on those things that are happening so that the community realizes that they are in the best community to live in the state of Florida. So thank you to the entire staff, everything you're doing, and let's move forward and let's get this new water plant open and operating, and let's get those transmission lines and wells operating as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Lanier? Board Member Lanier?
Yeah, hi. I just wanted to say that I think that to piggyback off of Dr. Spiritus' comments, there's a lot of things that are happening in this city that the city is actually doing right. I wanted Mr. Evans to provide to the public a copy of his updated memorandum on the reimagined Riviera Beach. I'm going to go through some of these things that are happening in this city. The new health facility with Found Care, the $55 million that the public approved for recreational facilities, a new city hall, the work that the Riviera Beach Police Department is doing with the school principals, what they're doing with the neighborhoods in terms of painting, in terms of helping neighbors and helping people in the community to improve their homes, the model policing program that they have, the fire stations, 86, 87, 88, 3, I'm sorry, 86, 87, 89, 3 new fire stations, the municipal beach improvements, the playground at the Brooks Center, a STEM park, the renovations to the Lindsay Davis Center, the parking that we have brought to the table to be able to generate revenue, the crosswalks at North Ocean Boulevard, the intracoastal waterway crossings, water main, and sanitary enforcement. Our existing water plant, the sheer amount of money that we're putting into our existing water plant, the new water plant that the city has online, the Marina Village refresh, this building here, the refresh for that building, the Oculina project that's at the corner of Silver Beach and Broadway, the Villa La Once project that is through CRA, the CDC program, the Villas of Solana, which is another apartment complex that is through the CDC and the CRA, the Utility Barrier project, the 2600 Broadway redevelopment site, the Miami South redevelopment site, the the Marina Village Phase 2, and the Berkeley Landing that just opened. And I can still go on because there are more pages. There is a lot of things happening in this city. And it's unfortunate that people want to bring up the bad things, which they should, but they also should temper that with the things that we do have going on in the city. And that Mr. McCoy is not the only one who wants to sit up here and say that he is doing something for the city. All of us up here are trying to work hard to be able to bring something good to this city. So when we talk about the city of Riviera Beach, we can temper our complaints with what is happening good in this city. Thank you.
No further business, meeting is adjourned.